What's good, y'all? It's Goat University. I'm here with a special man today. It is my grandfather, man.
Hey.
He is a hard-working man, a strong man, one of the strongest men that I've ever met in my life. Honestly, if it wasn't for him, I probably would not be here right now. Like, literally. I wouldn't be where I am today. I look up to this man and always have. So, my grandfather has a big, long, super inspiring story. He was a Vietnam War veteran. He's a lawyer. He's been to the Million Man March. He actually went to Dr. Martin Luther King's speech. So he has been all over the place dealing with race issues, growing up in poverty in Philadelphia to now living, I say, the American dream. So I'm just inviting my grandfather over here, just to give y'all some wisdom. And it's always good to learn from somebody who's older than you. I sit back and listen to his stories all the time. So I realize that, you know what? Why don't I share this gift, this golden gift dude with y'all? Because without him, I honestly would have no motivation to do any of this stuff. So without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell them about yourself, Granddaddy.
Okay, good. Thanks a lot now, Justin. Appreciate you inviting me on.
For sure.
I am Justin's grandfather. And for your information, I'm 75 years old, going on 76 in another couple of months. He's right. I grew up without a whole lot of assets or support or whatever. But we had situations where when I was a child, pretty small, my parents would struggle to even put food on the table. There was one period of time when one of our relatives lost their home and was homeless. So we wound up living in 15 of us, 15 in the same household. But we made it through. Fortunately, I was encouraged and prodded on to get good grades and to do well in school. So I was able to graduate, get a scholarship to college, and then once I graduated college, I went into the military. I took a degree in math at Temple University, and after that I went to...
Oh, he also pledged a fraternity too. It's not this one though.
That's right. I pledged fraternity Kappa Alpha Psi.
Yeah.
I crossed in 1963.
63, that's way back.
And speaking of 63, that's the same year of the March on Washington with Martin Luther King Jr. that I was honored and privileged enough to attend. Also, after graduation, I went into the military, and of course, wherever you go in the United States, at least back in those days and even today, you're going to encounter some kind of discrimination or some kind of problems. After the military, I went to graduate school. Went to University of Penn in systems engineering, and then after encountering some discrimination in employment and elsewhere, I realized that I needed to do something to write my own ticket. So I went to law school, and
we're going to get into that too. Y'all going to hear his whole story. We're going to get into that.
and get into, I went to law school, and afterwards I practiced law, formed my own firm, and the Lord blessed me to be successful at it and to be able to raise such a fine grandson as Justin right here. So there you go. That's a nutshell.
So that's the short. So let's jump into the basics. So as you guys know, he was born back when we were going through the civil rights movement. So I want you to give a couple examples of times you've experienced racism growing up in America.
Okay. Well, there's a number of them, and the key to the thing is when you encounter racism or discrimination, is don't let it get you down. Let it reinforce you to be able to strive and do better. There was one incident back in, this had been early in junior high school somewhere. It was a junior high school physics class. And there was this exam that the teacher gave that was particularly difficult. And one person in the class, the highest grade was a 79. And that's what one young lady, a Caucasian student, got. She got a 79 and I got a 77. And the instructor gave her an A and gave me a C. And I went to him and I says, why can't you grade on a curve? She got an A, then I ought to get a B. And he said, well, I did on a curve, and a 77 is a C, and he refused to change the grade. And so I knew that it was only a racial thing why he was doing that. But it made me realize that I needed to excel and I needed to do better than anyone else in order to get the fair recognition. In that same school, by the time the two of us graduated, I won the math award, I won the physics award, and that was my gratification for having been cheated out of that B in physics class back in that early grade. But that's some of the early things. But I cite that as an example that when you encounter those situations, you just have to try harder and do your flat level best to excel so that there's no question that you've done the best.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So, about your college, I mean, he's told me stories about, where he's seen white only water fountains. Like, that's always obvious. But about how did you barely make it? And not saying, when I say barely, I don't mean like grade wise. I'm talking about how did you barely get to college? Like, he was blessed enough to go to college. I remember you told me your story about how you got a certain scholarship, but there was a crazy way on how he got that scholarship. If it wasn't for that scholarship, it would have been up in the air.
Oh, well, it was a scholarship. It was a competitive. It was the name of it was the Philadelphia High School College Scholarship Contest. And you took a competitive exam for it. And I took the competitive exam, and
How many people applied for it?
Now, I don't know how many people applied for it, but it was available to any of the high school graduates in Philadelphia. And at the time, I suppose there must have been at least 20, 22 high schools in Philadelphia.
So it was a lot.
And each of them had people to do it. So I was fortunate enough to score well enough to get that scholarship, because without that, I certainly would have had a lot more difficulty trying to get in college and paying for it. But fortunately with that, I didn't have to worry about, my tuition or books or that kind of thing as far as the cost. And I was able to concentrate on my schoolwork and on Kappa Alpha Psi, which I eventually became Polmark, which is president of the chapter. And that was a really learning experience also. Justin is showing his Q Psi Phi band. Okay.
But so now that we got that taken care of, we got the college, striving in college. So let's talk a little bit about the military and your racial stories in the military. I know you told me that people were still racist when you got back home from the military, when you and my grandma were trying to get a house. And
Right.
doing with the service, you went through a little bit of racial issues. Let's touch on that. Share your experiences with that, because that's something why I preach, why I'm so strong with Colin Kaepernick and Malcolm Jenkins and stuff like that, because at the end of the day, I look at people like my grandfather who didn't feel like an American when they got back fighting for war. So I take all that stuff seriously. And people don't realize it until they were like, oh, my grandfather fought for this great country. But was your grandfather treated good when he came back home? I don't know. I know mine wasn't. So that's why I have an issue with a lot of this problems with why people disagree with Colin Kaepernick and stuff like that. But let me stop talking and put the shine back on.
Okay, well, after college, the Vietnam War was going on. And so I went into the military active duty. I had taken ROTC as an undergrad. And so when I went in as an officer. Started off as a second lieutenant, and by the time I was discharged, I was a captain. One of the things that happened while I was assigned to Germany was that one day I got some orders saying you have to leave your assignment here in Germany and go directly to Vietnam. And
where the war was going on.
Right, where the war was going on. And I knew that at that same time, two other captains in my same brigade had gotten letters, not orders, had gotten letters saying you have the option of either going to Vietnam or you can stay in Germany for another year. And but I wasn't given that option, and I realized that was
and
not
the
fair.
other officers were Caucasian.
The other officers were Caucasian, right? Two Caucasian officers. Well, to tell you, I was the only black captain in the brigade anyway, so the other two were white. But I wasn't given that option of either going or not going to Vietnam. But since I was a soldier, I had to follow instructions that I was told to do. But I also wrote a letter to my U.S. Senator at the time, who's now deceased, Hugh Scott, explained the situation. And by the time I rotated out of Germany, he had intervened, and I was told to go to the Pentagon Department of the Army, and they give me further instructions, which I did. And the instructions were that I could serve out the rest of that assignment in Philadelphia, which was my home, which was good. So that's where my wife and I lived for the last year or so of my active military duty. Now, once we were back in Philadelphia, we had we'd have to find a place to live, and we would call around for vacant apartments and the like. And but as soon as we would arrive to inspect the place, we'd be told, "Oh, the apartment was just rented out, so it's not available anymore." And this happened time and time again.
In your uniform too, right?
And that's right. We would show up with in uniform with my brass and ribbons and all of that, and but we couldn't even find a place to stay, and we eventually wound up staying with a relative, and then after a period of time, we did find an apartment in a mixed neighborhood that we were able to stay there. But that's the kind of thing that we go through. Also, when you're asking about discrimination kind of things, the in employment, I was employed after the military. I was employed, and I realized that number one, there were no minorities in the upper ranks of the corporation. I noticed that. Secondly, there was not the same emphasis on promoting and training minorities in the company, male, female, or whatever, as there were for the non-minorities. And I noticed that promotions were a lot slower for our people, and I realized that I had to do something to write my own ticket. And so that's when I decided to go to law school and form my own practice and do that. And of course, once I started practicing law, of course, I encountered discrimination, but it was more on the side of my clients who were encountering difficult situations. So I wound up handling quite a few civil rights discrimination lawsuits, as well as my primary work as a trial attorney. And the Lord has blessed me over these years. He blessed me to give me the stamina to withstand it, and to give me the opportunity to endure. And so it's been a blessing. And if you ever wanted to know the secret of success, that is going to be the faith in God and the hard work that's necessary to do it. And always, you hear the expression, keep the faith. Well, that's what you got to do, keep the faith, and eventually it'll turn out well.
Cool. Right. So right now we are in Maryland right now, and he actually lives on an old slave plantation. Mm-hmm. Can you tell a little bit about the problems you had buying this house on the water, and what the deed of the house said? And
okay, sure. The right now we retired to this place in Maryland. My wife and I, we retired back in, we bought the place back in 1991, and I retired about 4 years ago in 2015. When we were looking at the house to buy it, I ran what they call a title search on it, which is where you do a check to verify the deed and the chain of title and make sure everything is clear. When I did that, I came across one of the old deeds back in the 1966 deed that specified that this particular property could not be sold, leased, rented to any person other than the Caucasian race, and the only ones who could stay overnight had to be servants in this house. Now, this is as of 1966. So, realizing that that's what was in the black and white letter in the deeds, my wife and I realized that we had to be very careful to avoid being discovered that we were black. So we arranged to all of our mortgage application paperwork was done through Federal Express and mailings, and we never met with the bank. We did it all through FedEx. We never met with any real estate broker. When it came time to go to the auction, we hired a white lawyer out of Baltimore to do the bidding for us, and we managed to pull off the deal that no one really knew that we were black until after we had closed the papers and moved in. And and even to this day, some almost 30 years later, there's no other black owners on this particular river, and the river goes about 600 miles of shoreline, but there's none. And of course, it's illegal, officially illegal, to discriminate on the basis of race in selling real estate. But the fact is that, that's a situation we're the only ones, which gave me pride in naming our property 40 acres, because 40 acres is the amount of land that was promised to the slaves at the time of emancipation, that they would be given 40 acres and a mule. So the name of this property is 40 acres. We have a sign hanging out front saying that. And for several years I did drive around with my license plate, vanity plate, a mule. 40 acres and a mule. So that's the story of Here and Now.
Cool. So we got two more topics. One is let's talk about the Million Man March and watching Martin Luther King speak. Like, I wish sometimes I go back and I could be like, I wish I could zoom in to see you like at the actual march or the actual speech. How was that? Just take me through on that day. Like, what was going through your mind?
Well, that was a very memorable day. We took a bus from our home in West Philly. There was a charter bus that the housewives in the neighborhood had gotten together and organized it and coordinated it, and took us. I think we had a couple of bus loads went down, and it was of course there were several 100,000 people. At the time it happened in '63, I was probably 19, 20 years old maybe. And at the time, I didn't realize what great magnitude it was, because I had participated in some marches in Philly, picketing. I know we did some picketing up at Woolworth store, which was a 5 and dime market, we called it Woolworths, because the chain didn't permit black people to sit at their lunching counters. And so I picketed them. They were up at 52nd and Market Street, picketed there. And we did some marching up and down on Temple's campus for one thing or another. And so there was a lot of marches going on then. But I went to the March on Washington from my neighborhood, and it was very moving. I heard Martin Luther King Jr. make his speech about "I Have a Dream," and it was quite compelling. And I'm really honored to have been able to be there at that particular time. Now, I also attended the Million Man March that was headlined by Farrakhan. And for that march, I made sure that I took my son with me, Brian, and we went to that, and that was another momentous occasion that there were so many attendees at the Million Man March that there was some dispute as to how many there were. And the National Park Service, that's the occasion when they stopped taking counts and reporting what they estimated the crowd size, because the organizers indicated it was a number much larger than the press would admit. So the Park Service stopped issuing their count to avoid, that type of obvious discrepancy. But those were two major marches that I participated in that, looking back on, I'm glad that the good Lord gave me the opportunity to do that.
That's what's up. So how, the day that you found out that Martin Luther King passed away, how was your reaction to that?
Okay. The day that Martin Luther King was killed, I was on active duty serving in Germany, and the word reached us over there. So all of the, much of the rioting and much of the reaction and all of that went on in the United States didn't really reach Germany because, number one, it was a military installation, and military installations just do not abide demonstrations or protests because military is the military. But there was a deep level of concern when word came that he was assassinated, because he represented, hope for generations. And that, as you can see, since he was assassinated, it's been an uphill struggle to get almost anything done. And it was a matter of serious concern and worry when that happened. And at the time, I wasn't the company commander, but I was like second in command or whatever. And the instructions and orders that we got was to just be mindful of the conduct of our minority soldiers, because it was expected that there'd be some type of reaction. But in my particular brigade, there wasn't. So that's the situation there.
Cool. So as you see, the life story, right now he's not retired, chilling, relaxing and everything. So is there any last words that you want to say, a quote, that one of your favorite quotes, something, just give young black men and young black women that's watching this video any inspiration?
Okay, well, I can say that probably two things I would mention. One is a piece of advice that opened my eyes at a pretty young age. Not a pretty young age, but I guess after I got out of college and started in the corporate world. I was growing frustrated with the lack of upward mobility, the lack of fair treatment in the corporate area as far as promotions, as far as training, and the like. And so I started looking at other jobs. And I interviewed this one black recruiter at another competing company. And I told him, I'm really getting frustrated about this happening and that happening, and I'm not getting a fair shake, and it's all discrimination. And what he said to me, he said, what makes you think that it's any different anywhere else? And that registered with me, that I might have been unhappy with my own situation, but that was the same throughout, because that's the way our society functioned. And then and that helped wake me up that I needed to do something differently. And that's when I decided I'd change directions and go to law school. And another story I will tell you that's probably one of the more gratifying things to me is, I guess maybe 5, 6, 7 years before I retired, I was attending a function, and a lady came up to me and said, Mr. Atkins, you may not remember me, but several years ago when my son was in the 8th grade, my son got into some trouble, and you took care of everything and straightened it out. And she said, I want you to know that my son just graduated from Harvard Medical School. And when she told me that, I felt really gratified that I was able to help steer some young person in the right direction, and that young person succeeded. And that's one of the things I look back on with a lot of gratitude. And now I look back on Justin and my other grandchildren and I see how they're coming along so well, and I can tell myself that I did okay, and I feel proud of that, and I'm proud of him.
Cool. Well, that's about it. Thank you so much for coming on. My grandma, I want to interview my grandma because she got a story too, but she doesn't like being on camera like that. So I might have to hold off on that for a little bit. But if you guys have any questions, shoot me an email and I will ask him, make sure he answers anything if you need any advice. But other than that, thank you for watching. It's a super inspirational video. I hope you got inspired by it, and I hope you guys all get success somehow, some way, and continue to just persevere through life. And with that being said, it's Ghost University, where we're academically, socially, and spiritually superior. I'll see you next at the next video. Peace.
Okay.
Good.
Hey.
There you go.
Hey.
Oh,
All
let me
right.
end it.